I think what Trevor Noah said was racist. You know, I don't know if I would call Trevor Noah racist. I don't follow him all that often. I don't read what he writes. I don't watch The Daily Show. And there's a fine line between being a dick and saying something dumb and being an actual racist. I can say, in this instance, Trevor Noah said some stuff about the World Cup, and I kind of feel like it's racist, but we'll read through the story and you can make up your own mind. This is a story from Vox. Trevor Noah's feud with France over race, identity, and Africa explained. The feud involves the World Cup, jokes, differing ideas of censorship, and Noah's French accent. Okay. So Trevor Noah, he's from South Africa. Vox started the story by saying, an important intellectual debate is currently playing out involving the French ambassador to the United States and a late-night comedy host. During a Monday monologue, The Daily Show host Trevor Noah made a joke about France's World Cup victory, alluding to the fact that 80% of French team's players were of African descent. He quipped, Africa won the World Cup. Okay, the reason why I find that incredibly racist is that you can be like a 50th generation black person in Europe. It is possible, okay? And no, calling the players of African descent, I think, what, you mean the players were black? As if to say, like, what happened? So what, like, think about it this way. When the Bulls, or some basketball team wins, is Trevor Noah going to say Africa won, the NBA Finals? He isn't. I wonder why that is. I wonder why he wants to point out the race of these players because they were black and say, Africa won the World Cup. The reason I think that's racist, it's the idea that if you are of a certain race, you have to be of a certain place. And that's just not true. And I think the French ambassador agrees with me. Trevor Noah said, I don't even want to, I'm not, I no longer read quotes verbatim. I read them in the second person. So Trevor Noah said that he gets it. They have to say it's the French team, said Noah, who is black and South African. But he says, look at those guys. You don't get that tan. He said that you can't get that tan by hanging out in the south of France, my friends. Which I also find kind of racist, considering the south of France has had people moving about North Africa for a very, very long time. It's crazy that, it blows my mind. This is almost like an ethno-nationalist argument he's making. That, like, if you're a black person in France and you do something, it's actually Africa that did it. But the point I'm trying to make is that if your great-great-great-grandfather, moved to France from an African nation, and your parents and everyone has always lived there and you only speak French, but you're black or brown, does that mean you are not French? You know what I mean? And so what is the determination that Trevor Noah is going to make this point? And it's kind of like an ethno-nationalist argument. French Ambassador Gerard Araud took offense to the comments and sent a letter to Noah on Wednesday afternoon outlining his complaints. By calling them an African team, it seems you are denying their Frenchness. This, even in jest, legitimizes the ideology which claims whiteness as the only definition of being French. I agree with the ambassador here. That him saying, Africa won, they're African. It's like, dude, they were born in France. They speak French. They went to French schools. They learned French history. That evening, Noah fired back. And this is what's crazy. Trevor Noah didn't apologize. He rejected the statement and said, why can't they be both? And it's like, yeah, but you said Africa won. You didn't say, Frenchmen of African descent won. You literally said Africa won. And these are people who were born and bred in France, were trained by France, learned French, history, trained in France, and won. It seems crazy to me. That evening, he fired back, defending his original joke and arguing that Araud was actually erasing the identity of his nation's players. It's a powerful monologue despite Noah's attempt to imitate a French accent at the beginning and deserves to be watched in full. It's a powerful monologue. See, I disagree with Vox entirely. Erasing their identity, no. Noah erased their identity by reducing their identity to their skin color. Sure, you can trace back my lineage to various countries, and then if you try to imply that anything I did was a reflection of South Korea, that's bullshit. I was born and raised in America. I love America. The things I do are American, And if anyone's erasing anyone's identity, in my opinion, Trevor Noah erasing the French identity of these men simply because they are black And he is making the assumption that, they come from Africa. And like I pointed out earlier, what if their great-great-great-great-great-grandparents? What if it was a black family that came to France hundreds of years ago? And then you're trying to, man, I do not agree with this. I am of the liberal disposition that you can move to a country and become a citizen of the country. That even if you were born in France and you moved to America and you lived here and you became American, I would call you American. And if you had a child here and they were raised speaking English and they learned American history, they are also American. And I wouldn't look at them and say, yeah, well, your accomplishments are France. I'd be like, no, man, we invested in you. We are a community. We are a culture. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. You are part of our culture. God, this gets me so riled up. Ultimately, this isn't an argument about one joke. It's a debate about two competing visions for how liberal societies should handle diversity and racism. I'm of the idea that America did a really good job with its foundation and its constitution and the right to amend the constitution. And that over time we have done great lifting people out of poverty and granting rights to historically marginalized peoples. That's my position. I take issue with some of these, fringy, cultist kind of people who just make race, make everything about race. Trevor Noah is supposed to be the progressive leftist, and he has stripped the identity of someone from France by claiming that Africa won. Now, he pulled back when he defended himself saying, why can't they be both? And it's like, sure, but your original statement, which you did not apologize for, stripped them of their core identity, of being Frenchmen. I'm not gonna look at, a black American and be like, you're Africa. I'm gonna be like, you're an American, man. Much respect. We're in this together. Let's live together peacefully and find out how to work. I'm not gonna look at someone who's Chinese and be like, you must be from China. Your accomplishments are China. That's the core issue at stake is deep and philosophical. A divide over the fundamental role of diversity in democracy, one that explains, among other things, a major part of the debate over identity politics currently raging in the United States. The French vision of multiculturalism, or why France is really pissed at Trevor Noah. The core of Arad's response to Noah's initial joke was to argue that the comedian doesn't really get what it means to be French. France is indeed a cosmopolitan country, but every citizen is part of the French identity, and together they belong to the nation of France. Unlike in the United States of America, France does not refer to its citizens based on their race, religion, or origin. To us, there is no hyphenated identity. Roots are an individual reality. I like that. I really don't like how in the US you check boxes to figure out what your background is. Because so many people are mixed and have different backgrounds, what's the point of this? I just don't like how people become obsessed with race. Even if your argument is race, I always tell people, even if you're one of these, far lefties who wants to get rid of racism, even if you're a race realist, a racist, like a race realist, the argument of class is better. Because people who are living in poverty are going to face much more of the same problems than somebody of a different race. And if we solve the issue of poverty, which this country does, we slowly lift people out of poverty. If we just continue on that path, things are getting better. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's not going. It shouldn't go faster, or who knows. I'm just saying the point is our system does great to grant rights to people to solve these problems. And yeah, well, let's see what Vox has to say about Noah's response. An actual funny critique of French immigration policy. Trevor Noah is, of course, coming from a different perspective. A black South African man working in the United States, he's steeped in the culture of two countries whose entire existences were defined by race and racial oppression. Both nations have, in different and distinct ways, developed official cultures of multiculturalism, a celebration and accommodation of racial differences, rather than a erasure of them as a means of trying to reconcile racial tensions. Noah's response video is essentially an extended defense of this model and a head-on critique of traditional French assimilationism. For one thing, Noah argues, the French model erases the positive pride that Africans, both on the continent and in the diaspora, feel in their common heritage. Coming from South Africa and watching the World Cup in the United States, black people all over the world were celebrating the Africanness of the French players. Not in a negative way, but rather in a positive way, going, look at these Africans who can become French, you know what I mean? In a celebration of their achievements. See, I take issue with that because I understand this concept of, oppression in the United States, but let's change that. What if he said, Coming from France and watching the World Cup in South Africa, white people all over the world were celebrating the whiteness of the French players. See, I don't like that as much as I don't like what he's saying. Sure, there's a difference between white supremacists, who go on rampages and, general people who are celebrating black culture. But look at what happens with black identity extremists, like people in Dallas, who start killing a bunch of white cops. I actually lived on the street where a dude assassinated I believe it was a Latino and an Asian cop because he was mad. It was a black identity extremist. Identity extremism. I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of people being like, oh yeah, at some point someone in my heritage came from a certain place and I look a certain way, so I'm going to celebrate for that. It really does sound like an ethno-nationalist argument, and that I'm not a big fan of. When we talk about multiculturalism, it's important to realize that multiculturalism works so long as we have assimilation. That's like the primary argument. And what I mean by that is, look at a place like Sweden, the neighborhood of Rinkeby, of which I am familiar. I wouldn't say very familiar. One of the problems expressed to me by the Swedes was that when they moved in all these migrants, they formed enclaves that didn't assimilate with the greater Swedish culture and became sort of their own rules. They regulate themselves. So that's not multiculturalism because the cultures aren't working side by side. They're forming bubbles. Multiculturalism works when we're talking about a culture in a sense like what kind of food you eat, the music you play, that kind of culture. But when we talk about the legal framework for culture, that's when things actually get a little bit murky. Because then we have, female genital mutilation happening in the West. I don't even want to bring this stuff up, but yeah, it happens because certain cultures don't blend with other cultures. They don't mix. Or you have extremist fundamentalist religions that don't mix with other cultures. That's not multiculturalism. When I look at I think let's talk about mixing food, like a blend of colors or food or some item. If you put two things next to each other, that's not a blend. That's not them existing together. It's them existing separate and away from each other. So when it comes to the legal framework that we have, like free speech, the Constitution, that's a rule of law. And if people come in and don't respect that and don't integrate with that, we have a big problem. But if people come in and bring their clothes and how they dress and the food they eat, that is awesome, and I believe that should be encouraged. But a lot of this can only exist if we recognize that some cultures don't respect other cultures. And I guess ultimately the point I'm trying to bring up with all of this is I stand kind of by the French argument here. I don't care what you look like. I don't care how you dress. I don't care how you sound. I don't care what language you speak. So long as we agree on the fundamental framework of America. If I go to France, by all means, you keep it by your front. I'm not French, so I'm not going to speak for French people. But I don't care what you look like. If you're in America and you believe in America and you love America and you believe in the values, you are American. If you are raised here and you hate America, you are still American. It is a part of American culture to criticize the government, to stand up and protest, say no more, and defy the authority. This country was founded upon it, and you are still American for doing that. And I don't think any less of you for disagreeing with the government. I think some people would do well to learn history and better understand the world, but the First Amendment, the right to speech, religion, the right to assembly, is a core principle of American culture. So anyway, I'm pretty it's a long story. I'm not going to read the whole thing. The gist of it, Trevor Noah made a joke that I think was racist. Anyway, I'm not going to have any more videos up on this channel because I am super exhausted. I slept for 12 hours last night. Work. Whew. So stick around. Another video up on my main channel tomorrow, and I'll see you all then.